All right. So, hello everyone. Oh, shush, Tula. Sorry guys, my dog was barking at the random noises outside. Um, so I hope everybody's staying cool today if you're in the Ottawa area or anywhere in Ontario or I guess Canada. It's really freaking hot right now. Some of you I know are joining us from elsewhere. I hope it's cooler where you are. It's a little dark in here today because well, my partner closed all the curtains and stuff, and we're blasting the AC to try and keep it cool because we're like on the second and third floor of a building, and you know how heat rises and all that, so that's fun. Oof. Oh, Nurmit. Oh my God. That's really hot. Is that just 41? Like just 41 without factoring in the humidity or anything, or is that like 41 with humidity? Well, I suppose kind of humid, yeah. Well, that's hot. Some people like the heat though. I'm not one of those people. I'm a winter person for sure. People complain oh, you're on Fahrenheit. Oh, really? I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit either. It's probably close to 100 or more. 95. Yeah. Ooh, that's crazy. Um the what was I saying? Oh, the heat. The heat's getting to me. Yeah, I don't get it. People, I mean, the thing about yeah. Yeah, the thing about people in Canada is they love to complain about winter. Not me. I love it. Snow, cold, long dark nights. It's the best. It's my jam. But it's about 2:35, so we can get started with today's topic, which is mental causation, which is a fun one. Well, it's fun in some ways, but it's also some of the issues that we'll encounter today are a little unnerving in other ways because they have to do with freedom of the will and whether or not we in fact have it. They also have to do with whether the mental is real or perhaps, if not real or not real, an epiphenomenon. Could the mental just be all epiphenomena? In other words, all effect, no cause. It's um, it's fun. So this chapter, Kim starts it off with a long quote from Proust, who I don't know the work. I'm not a literature guy, but he's quoting from this long work where Proust is recalling, he's having this cup of tea with these Maudlin biscuits in it, and it brings back this flood of memories. And then he goes and writes, 3,000 pages or whatever about all the stuff that he remembers, right? Um, that is an example that Kim uses of mental causation. Here, a physical event causing a mental event, of course. So, and this is probably, I think, the best place to start is physical events causing mental events. Here, the tea, the taste of the biscuits in the tea, and everything, the taste, the sight, all of that. These are all sensory or perceptual events caused by physical events in the world, which then cause mental events like the recollection of a memory. This caused in me, reading this, my own sort of mental event where the bit about the tea reminded me about my favorite kind of tea, which is Earl Grey, which of course reminded me of my favorite Starfleet captain, Jean-Luc Picard, who also enjoys Earl Grey tea, which reminded me of various other things, and so on and so on. Like Kim says here, mental phenomena are intricately and seamlessly woven into the complex mosaic of causal relations of the world, or so it seems, at least. It seems to me that reading this quote from Proust, causes in me some kind of association between the tea that he's describing and tea Earl Grey hot that Captain Picard might order from his replicator or something, which causes further associations in me, like, oh man, I've got to go watch Star Trek later or something, right? Or maybe Star Trek reminds me of Star Wars. Oh, I got to go check out The Acolyte. You know, that just dropped. Actually, I watched the first episode. I haven't seen the second episode yet. My decision to do that, so like for example, oh, after class I've got to go watch the new Star Wars show, is a mental event causing a physical event. You know, oh, I desire to watch this. So I pick up the remote control and boop, turn on the television and I go watch it. Um, Mental events, it's important to note, can also cause other mental events, right? So we're talking, physical events causing mental events like the tea causing memories to return, a mental event causing a physical event. It could be something as simple as a desire to raise your arm and then you raise your arm, or an intention rather to raise your arm and then you raise your arm, or a desire to watch the first two episodes of The Acolyte streaming on Disney Plus. This is not a plug. Um, that desire could cause me, we want to say, to actually go and do it later. But mental events can cause other mental events, like my recollection of my fondness for Star Trek reminding me of my fondness for other outer space stuff, like Star Wars, perhaps. What other examples can you think of? I mean, there's probably something that's occurred just today that that you might be able to characterize as a type of mental causation. It could be a physical event causing a mental event causing a physical event, or a mental event causing another mental event. What do we think? Jack says, I feel hot. I have the desire for juice. I go get juice. Yeah. And that's nice because that captures that also kind of will segue us into the desire, belief, action principle, which we talked about previously in the class, but which we will inevitably run into again today, where if you're hot and you have the desire to cool down and you believe that drinking some juice will cool you down, or that it is an optimal means of doing so, you will go and drink juice, right? Janita says, I saw a red bird. I thought of apples. Then my brain sung ABCs, like A for apple, etc. Yeah, that would be physical causing mental, and then that mental event causing another mental event, kind of kicking off that sort of causal chain. Yeah, Jill, that's a good example. Hearing the train whistle reminding you of living next to a railroad. Yeah, these are all excellent examples. So just to reiterate, we've got physical events causing mental events, and we've seen that mental events can cause other mental events, at least so it seems. Like Janita's example, I think, is really good for this. And Jill's too. Like you hear a train whistle, that's a physical event, which elicits the recollection of a memory, which is a mental event, which may cause you to recollect further memories. So mental events causing yet other mental events, and that might cause you to undertake some action, like maybe scroll through some I don't know, some photographs of you and your friends when you lived there, right? um so this is the way it seems. This is certainly the way it seems to us, but is this really the way it works? Now, the problem that we're talking about, the problem of mental causation, which is, of course, how is it that mental events are related to physical events? How is it that a physical event can cause a mental event? Pretty straightforward. But how is it that mental events can cause other mental events? Or mental events can cause physical events? That is less straightforward. What is less straightforward, or even more less straightforward, is whether mental events have causal power at all. right? This is the problem of mental causation. And as you'll remember from our first few lectures and the first quiz, we had a question on the quiz about this. The problem of mental causation is also related to the mind-body problem. Yeah, neural firing, of course. Like, if I see, like Janita says, right? If I see a red bird, that's going to elicit a certain neural firing pattern in my visual cortex and in my temporal lobes, and it's throughout the brain in various places, which will cause a mental event, my conscious perception of the bird. Um, but as we'll see when we discuss supervenience in a little bit more detail, it's not entirely clear whether mental events can cause anything at all. But how is this related to the mind-body problem? This is what Kim has to say. If your mind is going to cause your limbs to move, it presumably must first cause an appropriate neural event in your brain. But how is that possible? How can a mind, or a mental phenomenon, cause a bundle of neurons to fire? Through what mechanisms does a mental event, like a thought or a feeling, manage to initiate or insert itself into a causal chain of electrochemical neural events? And how is it possible for a chain of physical and biological events and processes to burst suddenly and magically into a full blown conscious experience with all its vivid colors, shapes, smells, and sounds? Think of your total sensory experience right now: visual, tactile, auditory, olfactory, and the rest. How is it possible for all this to arise out of molecular activities in the gray matter of your brain? I think that's a great way to put the problem. Um, and we can see how it's related to the mind body problem. Because, well, how is it that neurons firing just are the smell of coffee, or the perception of a red bird, or the sound of a whistle on a train, right? How is it that that can be so? We've seen various answers. Substance dualists would say, well, there's some sort of interaction between mental and physical substance. Identity theorists would say it just is the case that certain kinds of neural activity are either uh, kinds of brain activity, or are types of kinds of brain activity. As we saw last time, functionalists talk only of input-output relations, and they don't really have much to say about phenomenology or the subjective what its likeness of our conscious experience, right? They don't have a lot to say about this, although maybe there's some hope in, I don't know, role functionalism versus realizer functionalism. Uh, but I'm going to not go down that rabbit hole today. So I think we can pretty clearly see how the problem of mental causation and the mind body problem are connected. And although Kim doesn't discuss this, they're all kind of, there's a real big family resemblance between all these problems. Also, the hard problem of consciousness, which is a problem articulated by David Chalmers, right? We have the easy problems when it comes to studying consciousness and mentality, like, the things that cognitive scientists can easily do, behavioral studies, brain scans, all of that stuff. No problem. We can do that. We want to know what part of the brain does what. We can figure that out. But how is it that this group of neurons firing results in a conscious experience of red, and this group firing results in the experience of the bitter aroma of coffee? Those are hard problems, at least according to Chalmers, right? But here we're talking about, strictly speaking, causation. And a big concern for us here is agency, and whether we in fact have agency. Because if we're talking mental events causing physical events, what we're talking about is the kind of thing like, I intend to raise my arm, and so I do. I am the cause of my arm going up. If mental events cannot cause physical events, then I'm not really an agent. Now, what is an agent? An agent has agency. An agent is somebody who can act on the basis of reasons. They can perform actions because for reasons. Like Jack said earlier, I desire juice, and I believe there's juice in the fridge, and that's the reason why I get up and go to the fridge and pour myself a glass of juice, right? And the idea here is that agents are the causes of their own actions. I talked about the intention to raise my arm, or you could also think about moving your leg. Just think of the difference between intending to move your leg, say to change positions or something. The difference between that and having a doctor strike your patellar tendon with one of those reflex hammers and your leg just kind of moves, right? In that case, you are not the agent, right? Your leg was moved, but you didn't move your leg. So you're not an agent. But if you decide to move your leg to change position, well, then you are an agent. Well, that's a good question. Who is the agent, our minds or God? Remember, so that's Taylor asking that question. Remember, if you believe that God is the agent, then you're an occasionalist, like Malebranche, right? So, that's the idea. Occasionalism is the idea that God is the only causal agent. So I might have an intention to raise my arm, and it seems like I'm raising my arm, but actually God intervened and was like, "Oh, Josh wants to raise his arm. Whoop, there you go." And God is actually the causal agent there. But most philosophers nowadays want the person to be the agent. So I wouldn't say it's just our minds, because I believe that we are embodied creatures, right? Well, we obviously are embodied creatures, right? I'm not just a brain. I'm not just a disembodied mind or a brain in a vat. I'm a creature with a body that exists in this sort of physical space that we call the world, right? So I want to say that I'm an embodied agent, and so do many other philosophers. So in the first case, getting back to the moving your leg example, if I decide to move my leg and then my leg moves because I made it move, I'm the agent. But if a doctor just boop, hits it with a hammer, well, I'm not the agent in that case. Likewise, if I decide to move my leg, but occasionalism is true and God moves my leg for me, I am also not an agent, right? That's right. Like Jill just said, right? If God moved my arm, I would not ever have agency, as God would be the agent. That's right. If you're an occasionalist, yeah, God is really the only agent. Um, which is a little unnerving, right? If you think about it. So Taylor asks, why did philosophy experience that change from God as the agent to us? Was there an actual moment? Well, I mean, not all philosophers were occasionalists. Um, in fact, not many. I actually don't know of very many besides Malebranche, right? Um, yeah. So in but Taylor, what has changed is this sort of understanding of God as this kind of Aristotelian prime mover, like as a first cause. Um, this is one of the arguments this is one of the arguments for the existence of God. In fact, if you look at the history of philosophy, everything has a cause, but there must be some first cause which set everything is in motion, right? And that first cause must be God. I believe that is the cosmological argument. Um, so that has changed. Um, Janita says, considering occasionalists, would that belief mean that the mental cannot cause the physical? I take it as entailing that, yes, because God has got to cause everything, really. God intervenes when you have an intention to do something, and he actually makes it happen. But Jack has a good point. Very few religions want to actually give God agency. Yes, it does cause problems with moral responsibility. Well, some people, some like atheists, I am an atheist, but an atheist counter argument to the existence of God often involves original sin, like an argument against original sin. Like God gave us free will and left us in this garden and said, "Don't eat the fruit of knowledge." And what do? We go ahead and eat it. Um, and God kicks us out and blames us for that. And then we have this original sin thing. But then again, original sin is specific to Christianity. It's not there in Judaism, and it's not there in Islam either. Um, so that's really just particularly a Christian thing. But it's true. People don't want to give God too much agency because then God can intervene all the time. And if God is the agent, then you cannot be held responsible, right? If you're not the agent, you cannot be held responsible. And we want to hold you responsible. Agents are the kinds of things that are responsible for their actions. If I do something morally praiseworthy, like if I decide I'm going to donate, say I got a big tax return, right? And I decide I'm going to donate that money to the food bank, then I, the agent, would deserve praise. Or at least we could say, that's a good thing. You're responsible for that good thing. You don't have to be like, yay, Josh, but you would but we would be able to say, oh, Josh is the agent who gave that money to the food bank, right? But if mental causation is not a thing, and I'm just some kind of automaton, I can't be held responsible for that good action. If I'm like a murderer and I say I'm going to go kill this guy, um, and I do it for reasons, I can then be held responsible as the agent who caused the death of another human. But if I am not an agent, well, maybe I'll get some time in prison or something, but it won't be like what I would get for first degree murder or something. And there are actual cases where this happens, and our legal system has to contend with this, right? There's a case of a man who was sleepwalking, and I believe I don't have the details fresh in my mind for this, but he was sleepwalking and he killed, I believe, his mother-in-law or something while he was sleepwalking. And yeah, he was not held criminally responsible for murder. There was also there's a few cases of people kind of losing it on like ayahuasca or magic mushrooms, and they kind of lose touch with reality and become violent, which by and large doesn't happen. Like I don't want to get all reefer madness on you, but there are some cases where these psychedelics are not for everyone, and some people who probably shouldn't take them, and then they do crimes. And there was a case of this in Canada actually recently where there was a man, I believe he had consumed psilocybin mushrooms and copious amounts of alcohol, and then went out and assaulted someone. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which actually found that he was not criminally responsible, which resulted in the Liberal Party committing to change the legislation um, around this sort of thing, so that in future people who get themselves inebriated to the point where they lose consciousness or lose touch with reality and cause harm can be held responsible. But yeah, a Dateline thing about that would be very interesting, Taylor. That's for sure. Anyway, these are all pretty stark examples, right? We're talking murder and stuff, but let's lighten things up a bit. And let's get back to more less grisly examples. Remember the desire belief action principle, which states that if an agent S desires something and believes that doing A is an optimal way of securing it, then S will do A. That captures nicely the kinds of things that an agent ought to be able to do, right? However, it might also be too strong. After all, sometimes we decide not to act on our desires, or sometimes we try and modify our desires before we act on them. Examples? Any examples? You ever have a desire to do something and then you go, I better not? Yeah, I'd rather be gaming right now, Jack says. I mean, wouldn't we all? Um, yeah, but yeah, philosophy is fun. Thank you. What if we had a philosophy game? That would be cool. Like a tabletop RPG? Philosophy Quest. Okay, we need to come up with Philosophy Quest, everyone. Um, we could have a 12-sided die and a philosophy master instead of a dungeon master. That'd be sick. But yeah, so say you want to be gaming, but you don't act on that desire. Instead, you go to class. Great example. Anthony says, craving something sweet at night, but don't eat anything. Yeah, yeah, man, actually got a tray of brownies over there that I try not to eat in the evening. Um, because when you eat before you go to bed, that just goes straight to wherever, right? Um, what about modifying your desires before acting on them? I mean, my example is I am admittedly a nicotine addict, right? In fact, taking up smoking, it was hands down the stupidest thing that I've ever done. Um, so I try to modify my desire. I crave nicotine, yes, but I no longer desire cigarettes. Instead, I desire this vape, which I'm not going to say is healthy, but I think of it as harm reduction, right? You could smoke some cigarettes and get a bunch of cancer, or you could not do that and opt for some other nicotine delivery system. Also, there are patches. There are those like little mouthpiece things. There's gum, right? So you modify your desire. What other examples do we have? Can we generate of modifying our desires? I mean, maybe you're not going to play video games right now, but you say to yourself, okay, after class, then I can play video games. Skydiving. Angelica, do you want to elaborate on skydiving?
Okay, so you know when you're at the top of a really tall building and you just have the desire, ooh, what if I just jump right now? And you go skydiving instead.
Yes. There's a name for that phenomenon. I can't remember. Maybe somebody can Google it, but there is a name for that where like there's a name for the urge to launch yourself off of a high building. I forget what it is, but there is a name. If someone can help me out by Googling that, that would be great. But yeah, that's an excellent example. Like, well, I'm not going to launch myself off this building, but if I do want to see what it's like to drop from a high place, I could go skydiving. Yeah, that's a really creative example. Um, we can also be prevented or constrained. Yeah, you want to go to sleep, but I decide to watch TV. Oh boy, that's the story of my life. Modifying your desires, or it's also possible that we have two competing desires and one wins out, right? You do desire to go to sleep, and you also desire to watch television, and one wins, right? So that's a good example too. Um, I could be prevented or constrained from acting on a desire, like well, maybe you're at the bar with your friends and you've had one too many. The bartender cuts you off, obviously, if they're a good bartender. And you say, "You can't do this to me." And then you say, "I'm going to go drive home." Oh, but then they've also got your keys. So you can't drive home. You have to take a cab or an Uber or whatever it is people do. Void syndrome. Okay, thanks, Janita. Interesting. Void syndrome. I guess because you want to leap into the void, right? Maybe that's why. Yeah, the call of the void, as Deborah says. Yeah. So DBA might be too strong because of course we can decide not to act on our desires, we can modify them, and we might be prevented from acting on them. So DBA is too strong, but we can tinker with it. We can tinker with it to make exceptions for these kinds of cases. But the basic idea of the desire belief action principle is fundamental in terms of our understanding of ourselves as agents, right? So maybe, if we're going to tinker with it, we could say that an agent needs good reasons to act, or that there is only a certain probability that she'll do X if she believes that X is an optimal means of securing A, rather than saying that she'll certainly do it. Um, Maybe we can allow for multiple reasons, right? Like there could be multiple belief desire chains that might cause a certain behavior. Uh, Maybe some of these reasons are not just good, but they're also motivating reasons, right? Um, you know, a good reason to act would be like if you believe that doing X will bring about A, right? But there are also those reasons that actually kind of push you into acting. They kind of move you. They motivate you. Can we think of a reason like that? A motivating reason, that is. There are lots of everyday examples. I've just started going back to the gym after not doing that over the winter, which I deeply regret. Um, because summer's here, and I don't want to be walking around out of breath all the time in the heat. So if that's a motivating reason. Health and well-being. Don't fail the class. Yeah, you want to pass the class. It feels bad to get an F. Um, and it feels good to get an A. So maybe your desire not to fail, or your desire to excel, those can serve as motivating reasons. Exactly. That's a good one, Thomas. Being thirsty motivates me to drink water, of course. And that's a very hard one to resist, too. Like when you're really thirsty, trying not to drink something, it's like you have to fight it. Um, so yeah, we can have motivating reasons, all kinds of motivating reasons that aren't just optimal ways of securing what we want, but actually push us in the direction we need to go. Right? Thirst is a good one, like Jill says. Hunger's a really good one too, you know. But which reasons cause the actions? If there are many, many belief desire chains, which one caused the actions, right? Say I want to be healthy. I don't want to get old and be all like sluggish and out of shape. So I try to go to the gym now. That's a motivating reason. But maybe you want to get shredded. I don't, but there are those guys and gals that they want to get shredded, right? Like that's a motivating reason. Maybe you just like going to the gym because you got some buddies there that you like to work out with. That's another motivating reason. So there's three motivating reasons. Which one causes you to go to the gym? Do they all cause you to go, or does one cause you? Is my going to the gym causally overdetermined? Right? So even if we tinker with the desire belief action principle, all of this stays complicated. So One thing that is rather widely accepted from Donald Davidson, philosopher Donald Davidson, is that the reason why you do an action, the reason why you perform this or that action, that reason is the cause of that action. In Kim's words, what makes a reason for an action an explanatory reason is its role in the causation of that action. So that's how we explain behavior. And think here of folk psychology, right? If you want to explain the behavior of your roommate who uh, takes their umbrella with them when she leaves the apartment, right? Okay, what caused her to bring her umbrella? Perhaps a belief that it is going to rain and a desire to stay dry. So those are reasons why she brought the umbrella together, right? I would say that belief desire chain is the reason, right? And that explains her behavior. It explains the action she took, namely grabbing the umbrella, throwing it in her bag before jetting off to wherever she's going, right? So if the reason why you did X is the causal explanation of that action X, well, it follows from that that agency can only be possible if mental causation is possible. We cannot be agents if there's no mental causation. That is, in the sense of mental events causing physical events. For an agent, Kim writes, is someone who is able to act for reasons and whose actions can be explained and evaluated in terms of the reasons for which he acted. This entails that reasons, that is, mental states like beliefs, desires, and emotions, must be able to cause us to do what we do. Since what we do almost always involves movements of our limbs and other body parts, this means that agency, at least human agency, presupposes the possibility of mental to physical causation. Somehow, your beliefs and desires cause your limbs to move in appropriate ways so that in 10 seconds, you find your whole body, made up of untold billions of molecules and weighing over 100 pounds, displaced from your bedroom to the kitchen. A world in which mental causation does not exist is one in which there are no agents and no actions. And actions, no actions, this doesn't mean that nothing happens. Actions are, what agents do. Actions are not, trees falling in forests, right? Or rocks rolling down hills. Those are events. And sure, actions might be kinds of events, but they're kinds of events that are caused by agents. So here, action is a technical term. So, are we all following along so far? Good, good, good. Agents. So Hylia. So Hyla. Sorry, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. An agent is someone who can act on the basis of reasons. So I'm thirsty. That's the reason why I got out of bed and went to the fridge in the middle of the night. Yeah. So that's an agent, and agents perform actions. Actions are events that are caused by agents, and agents act on the basis of reasons. Now, it seems pretty uncontroversial that perceptions can cause mental events. Something that acts without a reason. Well, sometimes humans seem to act without reasons, and we might say that they're just being irrational. But then there are objects which don't act the way they do for reasons, like a rock rolling down a hill doesn't have reasons for doing what it does. It's just following the laws of gravity and so forth, right? So there is a reason why the rock rolls down the hill, but the rock doesn't have like internal states that we would call reasons, and so the rock is just an object, whereas I'm an agent. I wouldn't say so. I maybe some Davidson would probably say yes, humans are the only agents. But I want to allow for non-human animals to have agency, especially the more sophisticated ones. I don't know, maybe insects are not agents, but perhaps great apes can be agents, right? The only thing is with non-human animals is that their reasons, their mental states are not going to be linguistically formatted, which Davidson incidentally thought was pretty important. But most philosophers today say no, we can have like non-linguistic propositional attitudes that serve as reasons why creatures do things. So yeah, that's fine. We can absolutely do that. It would be a fun essay. You're right. It would absolutely would be a great essay. Like Animal Minds. I haven't started evaluating the proposals yet, but I imagine a few of you are probably going to write about animal minds, which would be a great topic. So yeah, it's uncontroversial that perceptions cause mental events. Um, the way I've worded this is a bit weird. I would say that physical events can cause perceptions and that they can further cause beliefs and desires. Um, yeah, I would say that perceptions are mental events. Um, so there can be no knowledge without mental causation because everything comes in to the mind via perception. But um, we don't know about the world by merely observing it. We also do experiments. We manipulate certain features of the world and we see what happens, right? So doing scientific experiments presupposes mental causation. You see why? It's because there are scientists, and these scientists have questions, right? Take a very simple example. When you were in elementary school doing your science fair, or whenever you did your science fair, did you ever do that really simple experiment where you take some hot water and then you take some cold water, you put them both in the freezer, and you see which one freezes first? Anyone ever do that? I actually didn't do that, but I had some classmates who did. It's kind of one of those go-to ones, it's right above baking soda and vinegar volcano. Um, Janita has not. Well, who wants to? What water do you think freezes first, the hot water or the cold water? Let's form a hypothesis. Noah hasn't done it. Okay, interesting. This was when I was growing up. This was like a go-to science experiment in elementary school. Yeah, Taylor and Angelica, you are correct. The hot water will actually freeze first. Why? Well, the hot water, uh, its molecules are going around real fast. More mean kinetic energy in all those molecules, which means they can also lose that energy faster. So, yeah. That's Gordon Ramsay's folk physics steering him wrong. Yeah, using hot water to make ice. Well, checkmate, Gordon Ramsay. You may have those Michelin stars, but he's not a scientist. I mean, Gordon Ramsay's, he play. I think he plays it up for the television. Like Hell's Kitchen, he comes off as such an asshole. But when you watch his YouTube channel and he's just cooking, he seems like almost like he'd be fun to hang out with. So yeah, like when he's making breakfast with Selena Gomez or something, and they're just like buds in the kitchen making egg sandwiches. Like, yeah, it seems nice. Yeah. Oh, definitely. I like, and that's true. Like, I cannot watch the American Kitchen Nightmares. It's so dumb. But the British Kitchen Nightmares is great because it doesn't infantilize its audience. Anyway, yeah. Gordon Ramsay, wrong about ice. Um, so yes, so say, let's say we're in elementary school again and we want to know what does freeze first? Maybe you have the intuition that the cold water will freeze first. But you don't know and you're going to check. So doing an experiment like that presupposes that you, the scientist, can cause things to happen in the world, like causing there to be a tray of cold water versus and hot water in the freezer. Um, and this is a very simple example, but it scales all the way up to like really sophisticated science that we do in like physics and chemistry and biology, in all kinds of sciences, all the way to the cognitive sciences or astronomy or geology or whatever. The idea is that we believe that we can affect the world, manipulate aspects of the world in different scenarios, and compare the outcomes to falsify hypotheses. So science and experimentation depends crucially on the notion of mental causation. So, when Neil deGrasse Tyson or whoever says, well, philosophy, what's philosophy good for? You can tell him, well, what are your assumptions about mental causation, sir? Because it seems like you've got some pretty staunch philosophical assumptions going on that you don't question if you don't do philosophy, Dr. Tyson. I don't mean to be rude. Neil deGrasse Tyson's okay. But I wish he was kinder to the philosophers, because philosophers have important things to say about this, right? Kim says on page 198, we must conclude then, if that minds were not able to causally connect with physical events and processes, we could have neither the practical knowledge required to perform our decisions and actions, nor the theoretical knowledge that gives us an understanding of the world around us. And that is an unnerving prospect. And mental states themselves, by virtue of mental to mental causation, play a role in knowledge. Right? Kim says, suppose someone asks you, is the number of planets odd or even? If you're like most people, you would probably proceed like this. Well, how many planets are there? 8, of course. And 8 is an even number because it is a multiple of 2. So the answer is the number is even. So here you've just done a little inference in your mind. How many, is the number of planets odd or even? Well, it's even because there are 8 planets. And before I get people complaining, yes, there are 8 planets. Pluto doesn't count. And you know what? I grew up when Pluto was a planet, and I'm totally down with Pluto not being a planet. Feel bad for Pluto. Yeah. Yeah, when I grew up, I was an astronomy nerd, um I was like one of those. I think I don't know if I've told this class this, but yeah, one of my oldest pictures that I have, I must have been 4-ish, but I had my little chalkboard and I had like all the planets on it. I would draw the solar system and I had all of them, including Pluto, and because I had all these astronomy books. I didn't like when my mom read me bedtime stories because I was a weird kid. I got read astronomy books, which was pretty sick if you think about it. So I was like, how some people grow up religious? Like I grew up as a little astronomer instead. And so, but even when they downgraded Pluto to a dwarf planet, I was like, yes, makes sense. I was okay with it. I don't know if we have any Pluto defenders here, but it's not a planet, it's a dwarf planet, because there are numerous Kuiper Belt objects that are as large or even larger than Pluto, and we don't consider them planets. Graduated from high school, Taylor says, the year they deplanetized Pluto and didn't understand why, little blue guy. Yeah. Well, the reason why is because, grade school. Oh, sorry, grade school. When did they demote Pluto? 2006? Yeah, 2006. Yeah, so I graduated high school in 2004. So yeah, all my childhood and adolescence, Pluto was a planet. Um, but there are Kuiper Belt objects. There are Kuiper Belt objects. I mean, Pluto's moon Charon is almost as large as Pluto, and there are Kuiper Belt objects like Sedna, I believe, which are even larger than Pluto, which is why they're all just dwarf planets now. So, hey, sorry for the digression, but that's another example of mental to mental causation right there. That whole just chain of rambling memories that I went through, right? And how what other beliefs can you think of that you have that are inferred from other beliefs? It doesn't have to be a scientific example, by the way. Could be a philosophical example, or maybe like maybe even like, do you guys watch the news? You react to events that are going on in the world, surely, that you see on the news. Your reactions and evaluations of those events are probably based on other beliefs, right? Any concrete examples? Also, why sorry, Taylor? I mean, I don't think I'm that old. I feel young. Is that why? I feel old. I mean, no, I feel young. Yeah, I'm always young at heart. Young at heart. That's me. What are some beliefs that you infer from other beliefs though? Anything at all. Can be a very simple example. Oh, okay. So Hyla says calculating money. Yeah, like if you have to do a budget. Oh, well, you working as a cashier. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess if you have to do a little bit of mental math, right? In order to give somebody the correct change, um, then exactly, yeah, you're going to be making inferences, namely doing mental mathematics, right? Jack says, walk my dog and saw fire trucks outside of a building, so I inferred the fire alarm was pulled or 911 was called. Yeah, there you go. Great example. Um, what else? What else? The correct way to do dishes. Cups, glasses, then plates, then pots and pans, then spoons. Yeah, so if these are your beliefs, then you have to then you could make an inference about whether someone did the dishes correctly. I have a stacking order that I do. I don't do the dishes in a certain order, but I definitely stack them in a certain order, because you have to optimize them. It needs to be stacked efficiently. So I go cutting boards, plates, lids, uh, different kinds of bowls or small plates, and then pots and pans on the outside, and then all the spoons and utensils and everything go in the little holder. But I optimize my stacking technique. And it's true, like if I go in, like I had some guests over one Thanksgiving, and one of them was like, I'll do the dishes for you because I made dinner, like do doing the dishes, and I go into the kitchen and I just saw how they were stacked all willy-nilly, and I was like, oh no, this is not okay. That's not how you do it, right? Yeah, I was absolutely flabbergasted because I'm just so used to my procedure that I have. Yeah. Yeah, Jill, like maybe that you ought to read them in the order they were written. Like one ought to read books in the order they were published. And I've just picked up, I don't know, maybe you've picked up A Song of Ice and Fire or something, and you're gonna read them in order, right? Yeah, comparing prices, Sohaila is a good one. Generic or brand name, whether something is good or not. Like you might not opt for a generic brand because you believe it is bad, or at least bad compared to the name brand. And that's an inference you might make. Like, and sometimes that's true. Like, I can't buy uh, like generic ketchup. It's got to be Heinz or French's. I can't do the the president's choice or the compliments or whatever. It's terrible. It's got to be Heinz or French's. Similar to the books, if you listen to an album for the first time, you shouldn't shuffle it. You should listen in order. That's, yeah, correct, Kim. I agree. Unfortunately, many people don't even listen to albums anymore. Yeah, experiment comes into play exactly. Maybe President's Choice ketchup is actually all right. I don't know. That's an experiment I'm not going to do because I like my Heinz ketchup. But yeah, President's Choice, not Deborah says it's not good ketchup. So Deborah's done that experiment. We could replicate it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to contribute to the replication crisis and not replicate that experiment. Yeah, Taylor, it's a bummer. Uh yeah, you should yeah, albums. I saw this tweet the other day or post, whatever they're called. I still call them tweets, where someone was commenting on, guess somebody, probably a high school student, opening up an album and going like, "Whoa, there are lyrics in here!" Like, it's crazy. Um, I I love albums. I think that's the proper way to listen to music. And I don't like to listen. I don't listen to a lot of stuff where you um you just got a couple singles and maybe a couple B-sides and that's it. Like, I want an album. Like, I want an album. I want something that I can listen to from I want something that I have to set aside an evening to listen to, right? That's what I want. Like headphones, beanbag chair, lava lamp kind of deal, right? Yeah, physical media, yeah. Yeah, I remember I used to have a lot of CDs, and they were great. I should get myself a turntable though, because getting into vinyl would be pretty cool. If the inference is based on a false belief, then you may arrive at a false inference, Sahaila, but you're still it's still mental causation. It's just that it causes you to arrive at a false belief. Yeah, that's true. That's a nice upshot, Taylor. At least you can get those albums for a lower price. And albums are curated by the band, like Deborah says, which is also nice. Yeah, most good music is designed to be listened to in sequence. Thomas says that's true. Yeah, one of these, I'm gonna get a turntable one of these days because I do like the sound of vinyl. Not to be a hipster, but it really is cool. And there is just something about listening to an album from start to finish, um, that's lovely. Yeah, CDs. Yeah, I have a friend, Kim, who he's one of my metal friends, my metalhead friends, and he goes to like Value Village or different consignment stores and just buys CDs. He's got a massive collection. Um, and even on Spotify, like, I do use Spotify, but I'll put on the album because I like the bands I listen to. You can't shuffle the album. It won't make any sense because they're all like concept albums. They're all about like outer space or wizards or something, right? So yeah. Oh, that's a really, yeah, $2 for a CD. That's amazing. So remember epiphenomenalism. Epiphenomenalism is the view that all mental states are caused by physical events, but mental events cannot cause physical events. I say that on epiphenomenalism, mental states are all effect, no cause. Thomas Henry Huxley likened mental states to the steam whistle on a locomotive, right? He said the consciousness of brutes would appear to be related to the mechanism of their body simply as a collateral product of its working, and to be as completely without any power of modifying that working as the steam whistle which accompanies the work of a locomotive engine is without influence upon its machinery. Their volition, if they have any, is an emotion indicative of physical changes, not a cause of such changes. So to continue, when it comes to humans, by the way, when Huxley says brutes, he means animals. But when it comes to humans, it is quite true that, to the best of my judgment, the argumentation which applies to brutes holds equally good of men, and therefore that all states of consciousness in us, as in them, are immediately caused by molecular changes of the brain substance. It seems to me that in men, as in brutes, there is no proof that any state of consciousness is the cause of change in the motion of the matter of the organism. We are conscious automata. So, and Kim notes like Huxley's reasoning from cases like frogs who have had certain parts of their brain removed, and they can still perform complicated actions like hopping around or eating flies, even though they're arguably not conscious. Or also soldiers who would return from war with brain injuries that made them kind of less or not conscious at all. They were still capable of navigating familiar environments or getting dressed, even though they didn't seem to have conscious awareness of much else. And so he argued that we and animals too are conscious automata. We're like little natural clockwork mechanisms that are conscious. We are aware, but but our feeling of agency is an indication that something in the system is changing. It's not the cause of those changes, like the steam whistle on a locomotive. The steam whistle is affected by the engine, but blowing the whistle doesn't then affect the engine. So, in the interest of time, let's keep moving. How do we respond to epiphenomenalism? So Samuel Alexander, who was an early 20th century emergentist philosopher, said this. He said that epiphenomenalism supposes something to exist in nature which has nothing to do, no purpose to serve, a species of noblesse which depends on the work of its inferiors, but is kept for show and might as well and undoubtedly would in time be abolished. What is he saying? Well, Alexander, Kim writes, is saying that if epiphenomenalism is true, the mind has no work to do, and hence is entirely useless, and it is pointless to recognize it as something real. Our beliefs and desires would have no role in causing our decisions and actions and would be entirely useless in their explanations. Our perception and knowledge would have nothing to do with our artistic creations or technological inventions. Being real and having causal powers go hand in hand. To deprive the mind, of causal potency is in effect to deprive it of its reality. What do we think? Is it true? Like, if epiphenomenalism is true, what does that mean for mental causation? He's saying that if it's true, uh, to answer Janita's question, if epiphenomenalism is true, then what's happening is we are imagining that there is something, the mental, which exists but has nothing to do. There's no reason for its existence because it doesn't cause anything to happen. So if epiphenomenalism is true, well, okay, then epiphenomenalists have to explain why is there anything mental in the first place? Because accepting epiphenomenalism amounts to saying that the mind is not even real because it can't cause anything. Yeah, it is a big problem, Jack. You're right. But does that clarify things, Janita? Yeah. Like, yeah. I think Kim is often mentioned, like when you mention Kim, um, it's like he's discussed as an epiphenomenalist, but I don't think he likes that. Like it was a problem he was worried about, right? Yeah. So Hyla, it is against psychology in the sense that, um, well, why do we even have a psychology if it doesn't do anything, right? So yeah, if epiphenomenalism is true, there's nothing for the mental to do. It's all effect, no cause. Why would that happen? I mean, just in evolutionary terms, why would something that has no causal potency evolve? Yeah. Is the mind just a spandrel, like Stephen Jay Gould would say, just something that came along as a free rider on the brain? That seems a bit implausible to me, but we don't know. Now, there aren't many who argue that the mental isn't real on the basis of epiphenomenalism. If you argued that the mental wasn't real on the basis of epiphenomenalism, you would be, by the way, a strong epiphenomenalist. But most people want to save mental causation. Mental causation is a desideratum, which is Latin for something that we desire to save. Jerry Fodor puts it very nicely when he writes, I'm not really convinced that it matters very much whether the mental is physical, still less that it matters very much whether we can prove that it is. Whereas, if it isn't literally true that my wanting is causally responsible for my reaching, and my itching is causally responsible for my scratching, and my believing is causally responsible for my saving or for my saying, if none of that is literally true, then practically everything I believe about anything is false and it's the end of the world, right? For Fodor, mental causation is non negotiable. What do you think? We've got to save it. Yeah, they do, Jack. Fun quotes, they do. Fodor was a really provocative writer, too. Like, have you guys heard of Steven Pinker? He's that linguist, cognitive science guy. Anyone heard of Pinker? Yeah, Jack has, Taylor has. So Steven Pinker wrote a book called How the Mind Works. What does Jerry Fodor do? He writes a book that replies to the claims of Pinker's How the Mind Works. Does anyone know what Fodor titled that book? He titled it Theory of Mind, good how the mind doesn't work. Good guesses. He literally titled it The Mind Doesn't Work That Way. Um, so yeah, Fodor is kind of provocative, right? Like how the mind works. No, the mind doesn't work that way. It's a great title. So yeah, good book. But yeah, it's non-negotiable mental causation. I feel strongly about that myself. Mental causation is not real, then I'm not an agent. It's the end of the world. But if we accept epiphenomenalism, we seem to be required to abandon our understanding of ourselves as agents. Can I even do that? Like even if I'm like, oh, all these arguments for epiphenomenalism are quite compelling, that means that I'm not really an agent because nothing mental can cause anything. Can I even believe that? Because it's so alien to my own experience of myself. Yeah, Jack, good point. What matters more is maybe the feeling of mental causation being real. And this is where, if any of you are curious about some of the cognitive science behind this, who refers more to dualism, Sohaila? I mean, you can believe in agency, but and you don't have to be a dualist. just to clarify that. But um, if you guys are interested in some of the cognitive science behind this, I will say more about this at the end if there's time. But um, check out Benjamin Libet's study on the readiness potential, and check out Daniel Wegner's um, work on freedom of the will. Wegner actually said that freedom of the will, or the feeling of agency, is the mind's best trick. It's actually an illusion, right? Um, and then Jack says, in a sense, then life is akin to a movie. Yeah, whatever we believe is just in reaction to things we have out of our control. Yeah, like as if we're doomed to be actors following our script or something. Can we even do that? I don't know. Let's see. It's about 3:45. I think it's probably time for a break. 3:45. Yeah, I should plug in my laptop. We're not quite halfway through, but why don't we take a break? We'll come back at 4, and then we'll resume. How does that sound? All right. Yeah, we'll take a 15-minute break and come back because this stuff is it's dense, this epiphenomenalism stuff. So, all right. Well, I'll see you all in about 15 minutes. All right. Let's slowly get back to it. Share my screen again. Come on. Right. So the problems we've been talking about are nowadays often put like this, as Kim puts it on page 202, 203. How is it possible for a mental event such as a pain or a thought to cause a physical event, a limb withdrawal, an utterance? Or in terms of properties, how is it possible for an instantiation of a mental property, for example, that of experiencing pain, to cause a physical property to be instantiated? We've done away with substance dualism, but we are still faced with the mind body problem and the problem of mental causation. And we don't have this problem with other features of the world, right? We don't have a problem with talking about chemical events causing biological events, for example, or political events causing economic events, or vice versa. And here the key point is that we're talking about sort of crossover between levels of explanation, right? A chemical event like increased, I don't know, increased caffeine might cause a biological event like an increased heart rate. A political event could cause an economic event, maybe some kind of, maybe someone's elected and the economy gets better or worse, right? We have no problem with that. Why is mental causation a problem? Maybe it's because of certain assumptions that we have. These assumptions are getting in our way. One issue concerns whether there are, in fact, laws that connect mental phenomena with physical phenomena, which we could call psychophysical laws. And this gets us to Donald Davidson's anomalism of mental states. The idea with this anomalous monism is, or the question whether is whether there can even be such psychophysical laws in the first place. Now, identity theory presupposes that there are law-like connections between physical states, those are brain states, and mental states. So remember, if you're a type physicalist, types of brain states are just types of mental states. If you're a token physicalist, your brain state that you're having now, maybe being in pain, is a token of a type of brain state. And functionalism does this too. Realizers realize mental states in law-like ways. Turing machines, brains, whatever. They realize mental states in law-like ways, meaning that there are, in a causal way, is how we should read this. What Davidson is concerned with is, or rather, are mental states such as propositional attitudes. He's not concerned so much with perceptions or sensations. He is saying on his anomalous monism that there is an absence of psychophysical laws when it comes to intentional states like propositional attitudes and their role in behavior. And a reminder that here intentional means that these states have content, right? So when it comes to propositional attitudes, remember that they are intentional in the sense that they have content, they're about something. And a propositional attitude is, again, an attitude that we can adopt toward a proposition. And usually, when expressed linguistically, propositional attitudes feature a that clause. So, I believe that it is raining is a propositional attitude, the content of which is it is raining, right? I desire not to get rained on, or desire that I not get rained on. So that belief and that desire together cause me to bring my umbrella with me when I leave the house, right? That's what an intentional state is. And propositional attitudes are intentional states by virtue of the fact that they have content or they are about something. Now, when it comes to pain or color perception or something, it's easy to identify what we call the neural correlates of those things. You know, when it comes to pain, C fibers firing. When it comes to color, it's going to be neurons somewhere in the visual cortex firing at a certain rate, firing along according to the wavelength of the light that's hitting our retina, in fact. But we can identify law-like regularities here, but it's not obvious that we can do the same when it comes to intentional states, like beliefs and desires. There might be such law-like relations, but if there are, these would be incredibly complicated. Now, a crucial premise in Davidson's argument is, to quote Kim, that the ascription of mental states, like beliefs and desires, is regulated by certain principles of rationality that ensure that the total set of such states attributed to a person will be as rational and coherent as possible. And further, we also attribute to a subject beliefs that are obvious logical consequences of beliefs already attributed to him. So, what makes the mental are rationality and coherence. Now, Davidson is talking about intentional states, not sensations or perceptions. We can certainly misperceive or incorrectly sense things, but Davidson is talking about intentional states. Now, here's the issue. When it comes to the physical domain, which we're trying to establish, we're trying to establish a causal connection between the physical and the mental. There's no requirement of rationality or coherence in the physical domain. So if our mental laws are such that they are rational and they turn on rationality and coherence, if that's what makes the mental rationality and coherence, how can we connect that with the physical domain in a law-like way where there is no requirement of rationality or coherence, right? And does everybody see what I mean? When it comes to the laws of nature, for example, like the laws of physics, we don't say that they're rational, right? It's just the way things are. Reason has nothing to do with it. Reason can unveil the laws of nature for us, but there's nothing inherently rational or irrational about physical laws. You see what I mean there? This is how Kim puts the issue. Okay, good. Yeah, this is how Kim puts the issue. Suppose now that we have laws connecting beliefs with brain states. In particular, suppose we have laws that specify a neural substrate for each of our beliefs. A series of laws of the form, N occurs to a person at T if and only if B occurs to that person at T, where N is a neural state and B is a belief. If such laws were available, we could attribute beliefs to a subject one by one, independently of the constraints of the rationality principle. For in order to determine whether she has a certain belief B, all we would need to do is ascertain whether B's neural substrate N is present in her. There would be no need to check whether this belief makes sense in the context of her other beliefs or even what other beliefs she has. In short, we could read her mind by reading her brain. By being connected by law with neural state N, belief B becomes hostage to the constraints of physical theory. This would be like if I had some kind of super sophisticated brain scanner and I hooked you up to it, and I could read via your neural activity whether you believed that Pluto is a planet or not, for example, right? Just by reading your brain. And that would mean that your beliefs are hostage, as Kim says, to the constraints of physical theory, which governs the neural events in question. And we could do this irrespective of what Davidson is saying. Like, maybe there are no laws for the mental. It's just that what makes the mental is rationality or coherence. But if we had a sophisticated enough machine, in principle, we could identify an entire system of beliefs irrespective of their coherence with the other beliefs that the person holds. It follows from all of this that there can't be causal relations between the mental and the physical. However, Davidson does believe that mental states can sometimes cause physical states. He disputes, however, the inference from the premise that causation requires laws to the conclusion that psychophysical causation requires psychophysical laws. Or at least he can do that, right? Maybe mental states do sometimes cause physical states, but that's not because there are psychophysical laws that underwrite the causation. Maybe we can try something else, right? Davidson could, if he wanted to, take an approach like this. If a mental event M causes physical event P, kinds C and E, under which M and P respectively fall, and which are connected by law, they must both be physical kinds. So let's try and make this a little more concrete, right? If I have some mental event causing a physical event, like pain causing withdrawal behavior, say that C is, pain and withdrawal, the subjective experience of pain and my intention to withdraw from the painful stimulus, then really this must all be physical once we get down to the bottom of it. Our mental event M is really just a physical event causing another physical event. So this is a view called anomalous monism. So there are mental events which are really just physical events. And if there is a causal connection between the mental events and physical events, it's because the mental event is a physical event. Kind of sounds a lot like supervenience, doesn't it? Or epiphenomenalism, I should say. Now, does anyone have any questions thus far? If there are any questions, feel free to chime in. But we'll continue. Kim says that on anomalous that's a mouthful. On anomalous monism, there we go. To say that a mental event M is a cause of an event P, now P may be mental or physical, amounts only to this. M, the mental event, has a physical property Q, or falls under a physical kind Q, such that an appropriate law connects Q, or events with property Q, with some physical property P of P. So if mental events cause anything, either other mental events or physical events, it's because the mental event has some physical property or is a physical kind such that an appropriate law, which would be a physical law, connects connects those events. And this starts to look a lot like mental state epiphenomenalism, because the mental states are actually not doing the causal work. It's the physical properties of the mental states that are doing the causal work. So we're not property dualists, right? We've gotten rid of substance dualism, but can we be we're not substance dualists, but can we be property dualists? Must we also dispense with mental properties because they might not have any causal powers? Kim says that the challenge posed by Davidson's psychophysical anomalism, therefore, is to answer the following question. How can anomalous mental properties, properties that are not fit for laws, be causally efficacious properties? Well, we could reject psychophysical psychophysical anomalism, or we could, on the other hand, try and show that there is some alternative open to us on which anomalous mental properties can be causally efficacious. And maybe we could do that with counterfactuals. Now, before we get to the counterfactuals, this is all pretty abstract stuff. Who's not quite clear on anything? Before we get to counterfactuals, because counterfactuals can also be kind of tricky. We'll just see here. No one seems confused in the chat. That's good. Well, what is a counterfactual? Does anyone want to explain? I mean, it says here, but how do you think of counterfactuals? Not at this point. No. No. We're moving on to counterfactuals. Yeah, it's like what if. Counterfactual statements are statements that describe what could have otherwise been, not how they are now. So we need an account of causation to try and escape, escape this prospect of anomalous monism where mental states are anomalous. They're not really subject to laws. Well, maybe we can find some laws by considering a counterfactual account of causation. Yeah, it's like what could be, what could have been the case. Like this morning I had coffee, but what if I had tea? That would be a counterfactual. So a counterfactual account of causation, yeah, it's an alternative explanation, but not merely alternative, but what could have otherwise been the case in a different possible world, right? So a counterfactual account of causation, no, necessary conditions are a little different. Necessary conditions are like something like it's necessary to be a mammal in order to be a human, right? A necessary condition of being a human being is being a mammal. That would be a necessary condition. A counterfactual account of causation would be something like, to say that event X caused event Y is the same as saying that had X not occurred, Y would not have occurred. So, as Kim says, we know that mental events, in virtue of their mental properties, can and sometimes do cause physical events because we can and sometimes do know appropriate mental physical counterfactuals to be true. Mental causation is possible because some such counterfactuals are sometimes true. We know that sometimes mental states cause physical events because there are counterfactuals that are true where that mental state might not have led to that physical event. So to show that there are problems with such an account, we would have to show that there are problems with counterfactuals. Jill, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the counterfactual. So, using the example in the textbook, it used a story about I'm thirsty, so I go to the kitchen for a glass of water and I trip over the dog. So, the necessary condition is that I'm thirsty. And then the
Um,
counterfactual, if I wasn't thirsty, I wouldn't have gone to the kitchen, I wouldn't have tripped over the dog.
Not necessarily. You might have not got to the kitchen. You might have still been thirsty and not gotten to the kitchen. Um, Maybe it was too cold and you didn't want to get out of bed, right? So
Okay.
so when it comes to counterfactuals, like we don't really need to be worried about necessary conditions.
Okay.
Um, uh, but it will turn out that counterfactuals might give us sufficient reasons, not necessary, but sufficient reasons to think of mental events being capable of causing physical events in a law-like way.
Okay.
Okay, so let's look at counterfactuals. There's a couple of approaches we can take. We can take a nomic derivational approach. On this approach, Kim says the counterfactual conditional, if P were the case, Q would be the case, where P and Q are propositions, is true just in case the consequent P or Q of the conditional can be logically derived from its antecedent P when taken together with laws and statements of conditions holding on the occasion. Let's try and make this concrete. If P were the case, Q would be the case. We need propositions to fill in P and Q. Well, let's go with that glass of water example. Like, if Josh was thirsty, if Josh were thirsty, then Josh would go get a glass of water. And that would be true just in case the consequent, Josh would go get a glass of water, can be logically derived from the antecedent, Josh is thirsty, taken together with these laws and statements. But what laws and statements? They would have to be psychophysical laws. So that puts us back to square one because Davidson, remember, says, well, the mental is just not that kind of thing. Mentality depends on rationality or coherence, but not anything like laws, uh like the laws of nature, for example. So we're back to square one. Everybody's following why the nomic derivational approach doesn't work? Like if we're going to if this is our counterfactual, if P were the case, Q would be the case. If Josh were thirsty, then Josh would go get a glass of water. It's true just in case the consequent can be logically derived from the antecedent. If we can logically derive Josh will get a glass of water from if Josh were thirsty. But that requires the psychophysical laws we're in search of. So this isn't going to help. But maybe we can try another approach, the possible world approach. Here we go. On the counterfactual or on the possible world approach, Kim says the counterfactual, if P were the case, Q would be the case, is true, just in case Q is true in the world in which P is true, and that apart from P's being true, is as much like the actual world as possible. So maybe there's a possible world uh, where this is true. Like in this world, P is false, so Q is false. If Josh were thirsty, he would go get a glass of water. But in this world, I'm not thirsty, so I don't get a glass of water. But there might be a possible world where I am thirsty. And if we can identify this world, we could then check if it's true that I go get a glass of water. So the counterfactual, if P were true, Q would be true, is true if Q is true in the closest possible world. It is false if Q is false in the closest possible world. And remember, we are talking about logically possible worlds, right? We're not talking about some kind of Rick and Morty multiverse kind of thing, right? We're talking about things which could have otherwise been. I mean, yeah, but that's different Q. That might be logically entailed from P, but P would have to be different. We would need then our counterfactual. The P would have to mean something different. If Sarah were thirsty, then Josh would go get a glass of water for Sarah, right? So our P would be different. We'd actually be dealing with a different counterfactual in that case. So let's look at a concrete example where we will look at a number of different possible worlds. Here's a counterfactual. If this match had been struck, it would have lighted. In possible world 1, the match was struck, it was dry, oxygen was present, the match lighted. In possible world 2, the match was struck, it was dry, oxygen was present, the match did not light. Now, which is closer to our world? World 1 or world 2? World 1. Why? In our world, there's a lawful regularity that governs many things in nature, including the lighting of matches, such that when the matches are struck, as long as the match is dry, the oxygen is present, the match will light. And as long as there's nothing wrong with the match, you don't have like a defective match, right? There's a law-like regularity in our world such that when dry matches are struck in the presence of oxygen, they will light. And this law also holds in possible world 1. But it does not hold in possible world 2. So world 1 is closer to our world, the actual world, because the same law-like regularity that governs the behavior of the matches applies in world 1, and world 1 is otherwise also very, very similar. It's as close as we're going to get to this world. So sometimes we need to refer to lawful regularities when we use the possible worlds approach. That's what this illustrates, because that's how we know that world 1 is the closest to our world. We know that because of the law-like regularities governing matches and their lighting in our world, the world that we actually inhabit. Let's look at another example. Possible world 3. Brian didn't want to check out the noise. He didn't go downstairs. Possible world 4. Brian didn't want to check out the noise. He went downstairs anyway. These are possible worlds in response to this counterfactual. If Brian had not wanted to check out the noise, he wouldn't have gone downstairs. Yes, Ohila, pretty much. Lawful regularity. It's the same, and it doesn't have to be spelled out in terms of a natural law. Like, we can spell it out like we've been spelling them out in this book, as opposed to how a physicist might do it. Well, you're onto something there, Sahila. It might not help, but we're gonna get there. But yeah, you're right. You're on the right track. This might not help. So our counterfactual, if Brian had not wanted to check out the noise, he wouldn't have gone downstairs. The first possible world says Brian didn't want to check out the noise. He didn't go downstairs. Okay. So there's a world in which this counterfactual obtains. World 4, Brian didn't want to check out the noise. He went downstairs anyway. The counterfactual does not obtain in that possible world. If world 4 were closer to our world, it would falsify the counterfactual, in fact. In world 3, Brian went downstairs to check out the noise. In our world, if he had not wanted to check out the noise, he wouldn't have gone downstairs. But he did go downstairs, so he didn't want to check out the noise. That means that this counterfactual is true. Because remember, in our world, Brian did actually go downstairs. The only plausible answer, Tim says, seems to be something like this. We know or believe that there are certain lawful regularities and propensities governing Brian's wants, beliefs, and so on the one hand, and his behavior patterns on the other. and that given the absence of something like a desire to check out a suspicious noise, along with other conditions prevailing at the time, his not going downstairs at that particular time fits these regularities and propensities better than the supposition that he would have gone downstairs at that time. Right? So there are lawful regularities, but we could be dealing with ceteris paribus laws, not strict laws like the laws of nature. These are those laws, these are those escape clauses, as Kim calls them, right? Um, like all things being equal or barring any other considerations, et cetera, et cetera. These are escape clauses. So we're not dealing with something as rigorous as the laws of nature, but we're still giving ourselves these very generous escape clauses to show that there's a law-like regularity by saying like, oh, okay, in this possible world, shows that this counterfactual is true, and that's because of law-like regularities that govern his beliefs and desires. If you were to go with strict laws, that would be closer to what Sohaila was saying in the chat, where we'd be talking about physical laws, and it's all physical, and we're back to epiphenomenalism anyway, right? So are we all on the same page? We're coming up, I think, to the last 10 slides or so. Oh, we're doing quite well for time. But I worry that I'm going too fast. So please, please stop me if I'm going too fast. Okay, so Hyla makes sense. Good, good, good. Very good. How about who's not following? That's what I should ask. Is like, I know it's weird. It's a COVID thing where at least when I'm teaching in person, people are really afraid to be like, I'm not sure if I get it, right? And I think that's because we're all used to being online when we can be anonymous. And here we are online in an online class, and people are afraid to speak up. But if you're not sure about something, no big deal. I'm here to. That's my job. That's what I'm here for. One of my favorite quotes comes from Mark Twain. I was gratified to be able to answer promptly. I said, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with not knowing and asking questions for clarification. So just in case people are nervous about being like, I'm not sure about this, don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. Jacob, that's fair. Sometimes even when I'm lecturing, I'm like, oh, PQ, counterfactual, and things can get a little bit jumbled. And I've been doing this a while, right? So that's just because what we're doing is a little tricky here, right? Yeah, or Socrates, right? If I am wiser, it is only by this trifle that I know that I do not know. That's Socratic virtue. That's right. Well, let's assume that we're okay with the counterfactual stuff. We're trying to use counterfactuals to look for law-like regularities, and when we find them, they're either natural laws, we're back, physical laws, so we're back to epiphenomenalism, or they're sort of ceteris paribus laws, and they're not as rigorous as we want them to be because they're sort of, because we've got all these escape clauses like, all things being equal, Brian will not go downstairs if he doesn't want to. But he might go downstairs because he has to, even though he doesn't want to, right? All things being equal, but things are often not equal, right? That's what ceteris paribus means. Oh, I think I forgot to explain that. Ceteris paribus is just Latin for all other things being equal. It means like if we don't have to worry about any other considerations. That's what it means. Let's look at the causal closure of the physical. Here's another problem. The causal closure of the physical domain. You might want to think about Laplace's demon, although it's a little that really highlights determinism, not just causal closure. But causal closure of the physical says that if a physical event has a cause at time t, it has a sufficient physical cause at t. So if x is a physical event and y is the cause or an effect of x, then Y also must be a physical event. There's no need to look outside of the physical domain from physical to non-physical, right? What would it mean? Just think of how crazy it would be if we did have to do that. So first of all, let's make sure we're all clear on what's happening. Causal closure of the physical domain is not determinism. It just means that any physical effect you can think of will have a sufficient physical cause. Determinism says that any effect necessarily has a physical cause. So hard determinism is stronger. And Laplace's demon kind of illustrates hard determinism. We didn't talk about it when we talked about Occam's razor, but Kim discusses it in the textbook. Remember Pierre de Laplace, the physicist who wrote a book on the motions of the solar system, the planets in the solar system. And Napoleon says, "Why? Where's God? I don't see God in your book." And Laplace replied, "I have no need of that hypothesis, sir, because physical events are sufficient to bring about further physical events. We don't need to look for any non-physical cause like God, right?" So that's the causal closure of the physical. Laplace's demon, by the way, is the idea that there is a supremely intelligent being who knows all of the laws of nature and all of the conditions of the universe. They would know with perfect precision what will happen tomorrow because they can derive what will happen from the universe's current conditions and the laws of nature. Now, that's hard determinism. That, again, is stronger than the principle of the causal closure of the physical. But the causal closure of the physical says that, if there is some event which causes another, or if there is if there is an event that was caused by something, that cause is going to be physical. You don't need to look for non-physical, like supernatural or paranormal explanations that are not physical explanations. And that's what I mean. Like, just think of what it would mean if it did mean that we had to go outside the physical to non-physical explanations. We'd be stuck doing parapsychology and stuff, for goodness sake. And if any of you have taken my philosophy of the paranormal class, you know what I'm talking about, right? Anomalous experiences like having a precognitive dream or believing that you've been abducted by aliens, right? We need not ever look outside of the physical domain to explain these anomalous events. So you didn't have a precognitive dream. It was probably coincidence. You weren't abducted by aliens. It was probably sleep paralysis, right? And those are sufficient explanations. It doesn't say that there aren't psychic powers or aliens or something. It just says that um, uh, if we explain it physically, i.e., non supernaturally or non paranormally, that is a sufficient causal explanation. Yes, that's right, Jacob. I do conclude in that class that ghosts aren't real. In fact, ghost hunters are probably the worst when it comes to violating the principle of the causal closure of the physical. And I'll tell you why. Okay. I have time for a little rant about ghost hunters. So, ghost hunters, some guy or some gal or some non binary pal says, "I've got a ghost." And the ghost hunters come. And by the way, the ghost hunters, that show, Ghost Hunters on A&E, they were plumbers and they just went ghost hunting in their spare time. They go from their like van that said Roto Rooter to their van that said the Ghost Hunters. Like it was their thing that they did for fun, which is fine. But they go to the haunted wherever. Usually it's a tourist attraction because reasons. So they go to the haunted motel or wherever. And okay, there's a ghost here. All right. So ghosts are non-physical. They're supernatural. They're paranormal. They're non-physical. So what do? Well, they get out their microphones and their cameras and their electromagnetic field readers. Stuff that measures physical stuff. So I mean, like, either ghosts are physical in which case we could study them physically, in which case they wouldn't be paranormal, or ghosts are not real, and what you're detecting on your EMF meter and your microphones and your cameras have a sufficient physical cause, which is not ghosts, because ghosts are not physical. So that's why ghost hunters are the worst, right? Because they're like, we're going to go find something non-physical. How? We're going to use our physical tools. It's just completely confused. So that's what I think about ghost hunters. But the causal closure of the physical doesn't say that ghosts don't exist. It just says that ghosts, you never need to explain anything like things going bump in the night by appealing to ghosts. You can explain it via, the wind, animals, an old house, etc. Hard determinism, more like religion, when it says that God should be there but can't see God. Well, can you clarify that? Because hard determinism, there are determinists who believe in God and determinists who also don't believe in God. So I don't know that it's more like religion. Hard determinism doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily imply that there must be a God. It depends whether you buy the cosmological argument, like whether God is necessarily the first cause of everything, or whether or whether that's not the case, right? Yeah, Laplace's demon. Well, that's a thought experiment. It's just an imaginary exercise, and I think the reason why it's called Laplace's demon is because Laplace was an atheist. It's like Descartes' Cartesian demon, his evil genius. Like Descartes doesn't want to say God is a deceiver, so he says, imagine this evil genius, this Cartesian demon who can deceive me in any way he can think of. And he makes it a demon because he doesn't want to say God is a deceiver. Similarly, Laplace doesn't believe in God, but he's like, what if there was a supremely intelligent being who knew all the laws of nature and who knew about everything, the current conditions of the universe? He could tell you exactly what you're going to be eating for breakfast a week from today, because owing to that knowledge and his ability to sort of calculate the future, right? But it's an imaginary exercise. You could imagine some kind of supercomputer doing it. You could imagine God in place of the demon doing that. But that's also an interesting thing when it comes to determinism. Like that is an interesting problem that religions need to answer. If God is all knowing, that means he knows everything that you're going to do in the future. And if God can know everything that you're going to do in the future, then how can you have free will? Yeah. If God has agency. Yeah. I mean, God might be an agent and interfere in the world and do miracles and stuff. But then God might also just be like a deistic God and like set up the universe, wind it up and let it go and then never interfere. Right. So it depends on what God you believe in, right? Like if you believe in a theistic God, you believe in a God that can and does interfere with the world, right? He answers prayers, he smites people, he performs miracles and so forth, right? But if you believe in a deistic God, then God doesn't do that. God just kind of made the universe and then goes away and doesn't do anything. Like and a lot of philosophers throughout the years, they believe in a deistic God, like a clockmaker God. Um, so that's that. So causal closure of the physical. Again, it does not say that a physical event cannot have a non-physical cause. It just says that our search for causes does not ever have to take us outside of the physical. It also doesn't say that every physical event. Oh, I've got a mistake. This is a mistake. It should not say sufficient here. It should say necessary. Oh boy. Necessary. There we go. It doesn't say that every physical event has a necessary physical cause. It says that a physical cause is sufficient to explain a physical event. And notice that it's also perfectly consistent with mind-body dualism. You could have immaterial minds. They just might not cause anything in the physical domain. So we would still have the mind-body interaction problem either way, right? Now, most thinkers, physicists and philosophers alike, accept the causal closure of the physical. They accept this principle. If we didn't, we'd end up appealing to supernatural or paranormal forces to explain things. And this would create a problem because we can't actually verify or falsify anything non-physical with the physical sciences. And that's what my ghost hunters rant is about. They're going to go in with their EMF meters and detect electromagnetic activity and say that that's proof of the paranormal or the supernatural. Well, no, it's not, because those things are by definition non-physical. So whatever you're detecting with the EMF meter is not supernatural, right? Also, explaining things by virtue of, or by appealing to supernatural or paranormal forces is akin to giving up. It's akin to saying it's magic. And that might work for, you know, when it comes to value, things we value, meaning in life, right? Science doesn't answer questions about meaning in life. So if you want to live a meaningful life, yeah, I get it. Maybe you'd read some philosophy, maybe you'd read some Stoics or maybe read the Hedonists or Plato. You know, if you want to have meaning in life, you're going to read some of those guys, or maybe you're going to read like Martha Nussbaum or Susan Wolf or something, right? Or maybe you're going to be religious. I've been reconnecting with my cousin actually, who we were out of touch for years and years and years. Cousin's a real smart guy. He's gonna go become a rabbi. You know, good for him. Like, I'm an atheist, but I guess Judaism and becoming a rabbi and stuff is good for him, right? That's a way for him to find meaning in life, right? And so I think it's fine when it comes to that. But it doesn't work for like explaining stuff that happens in the physical world. It might be great for living a happy life, but it's not going to be great for understanding how the physical world works. You guys see what I mean? So like, I'm an atheist, sure, but I'm not like one of those Richard Dawkins atheists who's grumpy all the time, right? So, you know, I hope when I talk about determinism and materialism and physicalism, if you're religious, you know, please don't take me as being antagonistic, because I really don't mean to be. It's just that I want to know about the natural world, right? So, um, causal closure of the physical when it comes to mentality, though. Let's talk about that. Suppose, Kim says on 215, that a mental event, M, causes a physical event, P. The closure principle says that there must also be a physical cause of P, an event, P star, occurring at the same time as M. That is a sufficient cause of P. This puts us in a dilemma. Either we have to say that M equals P star, namely, identify the mental cause with the physical cause as a single event, or else we have to say that P has two distinct causes, M and P star. That is, it is causally overdetermined. Right? This amounts to saying, like, you know, let's make it more concrete, like a mental event, M, like being in pain, causes a physical event, P, like withdrawing my hand. The closure principle says there must also be some other physical cause of P, P star. It could be some set of neurons firing in my brain. Either we have to say that the mental event, being in pain, just is that physical state, those neurons firing, or that M and P together, the mental event and the neurons firing, caused P, the withdrawal of the hand from the painful stimulus. But that would be causal overdetermination in that case. And if we just identify M as P, well, then we're back to identity theory. And not only that, mental states don't do anything. So also we're back to epiphenomenalism. And you can also consider the exclusion principle. No event has two or more distinct sufficient causes all occurring at the same time, unless it is a genuine case of overdetermination. And there might be some cases of overdetermination. I believe Kim uses the example of a firing squad. So causal overdetermination means that there's two causes for one event, but we only need one sufficient cause. So in this case, we can't say that my mental event, my being in pain, and the physical event, P star, the neurons firing, both caused P, the withdrawal of my hand from the painful stimulus. Because we only need one sufficient cause. Either the mental event caused it or the physical event caused it. Like Kim uses the firing squad example, like which bullet killed the man who was fired upon by the firing squad? Maybe several bullets killed him, right? So that would be a genuine case where we would say, okay, yeah, that's a little overdetermined. But unless there are genuine cases like that, we don't need to do that. There should be one single cause that is sufficient for any event, any physical event we need to explain. So let's construct a case where a mental event causes a physical event. And here we are following Kim. We could schematize it in the following way. So the first premise, M is a cause of P. It follows from the first premise and from the causal closure of the physical that there is also a physical event, P star, which occurs at the same time as M. So if M is a cause of P, then P star is a cause of P. Now suppose further that the mental state is not identical with this physical state, P star. And suppose even further that this is not a case of overdetermination. Well, as Kim points out, according to 1, 2, and 3, P has two distinct causes, since that's M and P star. 4 says that this is not a case of overdetermination, and the exclusion principle kicks in, saying that either M or P star must be disqualified as a cause of P. Which one? The answer, P star stays, and M must go. It looks like there was a little autocorrect error there. The reason is simple. If we try to retain M, the closure principle kicks in again and says that there must also be a physical cause of P. And what could this be if not P star? Obviously, we are back at the same situation. Unless we eliminate M and keep P star, we would be off to an infinite regress or treading water forever in the same place. So we must conclude that M is not a cause of P and 1 is false. 1 is M is a cause of P. That's false. If we generalize this, we arrive at mental events never cause physical events. So we're right back to epiphenomenalism. Frightening. So is everyone following this? Like, I know this is abstract stuff. It's formalized, right? It's formalized. Do we want to run through this with a concrete example instead of M's and P's and P stars to try and clarify? Jacob nods. Yep. Okay, give me an example, any example of a mental state and a physical event that we take that mental state as causing. Any example at all. But let's keep it simple. Sad breakup. Oh, but that's not simple. Okay, let's go with sad breakup. Mental state is, so P is our breakup. P is our breakup. P is like sending that text, like, it's just not working between us, okay? So P is like putting together and sending that text. M is, I don't know, a desire to see other people, or a belief that you are not, a belief that he or she is not the one, right? So I believe that so-and-so is not the one, which is the cause of my sending a breakup text. Now, it follows from this that there must also be a physical event, P star, that occurs at the same time as my desire to see other people and my belief that they're not the one. And that's some kind of neural activity, say. So it follows that P star is the cause of P. My neural activity is the cause of me sending the breakup text. And also suppose that the mental event is not identical to P star. So I have my mental events, desire to see other people, belief that so-and-so is not the one. And those are different from my neural patterns going on in my brain. And suppose further that this is not a case of overdetermination. Well, where does that get us? We must conclude that M is not a cause of P and 1 is false. We must conclude that my mental state, my belief that you're not the one and I desire to see other people is not the cause of my sending that text. It's got to be the physical cause because the closure principle kicks in. I don't ever need to look outside of the physical. And since the mental state is not identical to the physical state, I can't use the mental state as my cause of my sending the breakup text. It's got to be P star, another physical cause. And that gets us again to the same conclusion when we generalize it. Mental events never cause physical events. My belief that she's just not the one and my desire to see other people are not the cause of sending the breakup text. So if she takes it the wrong way or gets sad, take solace in the fact that, I guess epiphenomenalism is true and you're just a conscious automaton breaking up with another conscious automaton. How bleak. You see why earlier we saw that Fodor is so oh, we got to save this. We got to save mental causation. Right? Because otherwise, you're not the person who broke your partner's heart or your ex-partner's heart, right? You're not even the person, you're not even the agent who broke up with them. P in the breakup, P star in the breakup was the physical cause, the neural activity. So Hyla says, I can't believe that neural activity leads to a breakup. But if epiphenomenalism is true, then that is what leads to it. And our beliefs and desires are an effect of that, sure, but they're not what cause us to send the breakup text. And our sense of agency as the breaker upper, as the one who ends things, is an illusion. And yeah, I get it. It's hard to wrap your head around that. And if you don't believe that, that's fine. I don't not believe it, but I also don't want it to be true, right? Because then I'm not an agent, right? I mean, and for those of you who are more theistically inclined, this is why most major religions make such a big deal out of free will, right? Yeah, free will, like Sohaila just said, free will. Because without free will, you can't be held responsible for anything. So incidentally, that's one of those answers to the problem of evil, right? Right. If God is all knowing and all good and all powerful, why do evil things happen? Well, because humans have free will and then humans do evil stuff. That's one answer to the problem of evil. Yeah, yeah. So, on the one hand, God might know everything, uh, and then you might not have free will, or you could be an occasionalist. Maybe God made you do it, like Angelica says. Take the Frankfurt route, you still have some moral responsibility. Yeah, so you're referring to Harry Frankfurt? Jack, you were in your personal identity in the self, right? With me last term? Yeah. We did talk about that, and that's where we get to those deep self views, right? Where like, sure, you might not be the kind of agent you think you are, but why isn't my chat minimizing? Oh, well. But as long as your actions flow from your deep self, or like on Wolf's terms, your real self, then you can still be held responsible. And that's nice because it dovetails nicely with like virtue ethics and stuff, which I really like. What do you mean, Sohaila? You couldn't break up with them? Like you mean if it was your neural event? Like if you didn't have free will, is that what you mean? Because if that's what you're saying, yeah, that's the problem. The I, the you, wouldn't be doing anything if you didn't have free will. But if you have free will, then yes, you are the one doing the breaking up. Yeah. Even if determinism is true, by the way, you don't have to be a fatalist. Like a fatalist is somebody who says, what does it matter what I do because everything is determined anyway? Which some hard determinists might be like that, but you can be a determinist and still believe in free will. And that's what compatibilism is all about. So in the previous lecture, I explained compatibilism or soft determinism, which is kind of the middle one, and then libertarian free will on the one hand, where we're just not the kind of beings that are causally determined. And then on the other hand, hard determinism, where that's like Laplace's demon. We are just cogs in the machine that are completely determined, right? So you can be a determinist and still believe in free will. That just means you're a compatibilist, and that means that you're free in the sense that you could have done otherwise. Free in the sense that there's some possible world where you had tea instead of coffee, and you could have done that here, but you didn't. But the counterfactual is true in some other world, right? So you don't have to be a fatalist. You don't have to be a nihilist where nothing matters. Oh, everything's determined, nothing matters. Like has anyone ever seen that film, The Big Lebowski? Dude just wants his rug back. Yeah, great movie. Like, oh, that's my boyfriend. He's a nihilist. Well, that sounds hard, man. Like, it's an incredibly subtle movie. But yeah, the nihilists in that movie aren't even nihilists because they do actually care about stuff. They care when John Goodman's character gets rid of all their money or whatever happens. Actually, it's time to rewatch The Big Lebowski, I think. So anyway, you don't have to be a nihilist. You don't have to be a fatalist. Even if the universe is determined, you can still hold on to free will by being a compatibilist if you want to. Let's see if our problems get any worse when it comes to supervenience. We're coming to the end now. Recall, I should say, mind-body supervenience. When a mental property M is instantiated by something X at T, that is in virtue of the fact that X instantiates at T a physical property P, such that anything that has P at any time necessarily has M at the same time. So that's recall. Like supervenience just says that any mental property supervenes on physical properties such that anything else with those same properties will have the same mental properties. Now we can formulate this. Suppose a mental event like an instantiation of mental property M causes another mental property M star to instantiate. So say my belief that I am thirsty causes my desire to get a drink to instantiate. Now, according to the supervenience thesis, M star is instantiated on this occasion because there's a physical property, its supervenience base, and that is also instantiated on this occasion. So M causes M star, and M star is supervenes over P star. So why is M star instantiated on this occasion? What is ultimately responsible for the fact that M star occurs? There's two presumptive answers. Because M caused M star to instantiate, or because the supervenience space, the P star, which is the supervenience space of M star, was instantiated on the same occasion. According to Kim, the second option trumps the first. Why? Well, I think it should be obvious for reasons we've already seen. How could M and P both cause M and P star? It would seem simpler just to say that P causes P star and M star supervene over those bases, respectively, right? Isn't that how it seems, at least? That's how it seems to me. That's how I understand Kim here. But maybe hope is not lost. We might be able to reconcile 1 and 2. This is what Kim has us consider. He says, consider that these two claims, 1 and 2, can be reconciled so long as we're willing to accept M caused M star to instantiate. M causes the instantiation of M star by causing M supervenience space P star to instantiate. So M causes P star. That would be an instance of mental to physical causation. That's the supervenience argument, and it's meant to show that mental causation is possible, just in case that mental physical causation is possible. But maybe mental physical causation is not possible. On the supervenience argument, though, mental events can cause other mental events, just in case mental physical causation is possible. The exclusion argument, you'll recall, says that mental physical causation is not possible. So this would mean, if we apply the exclusion argument, that neither mental or mental physical causation is possible. And this is what we call radical epiphenomenalism. Radical epiphenomenalism, again, says mental causation is not possible and mental physical causation is not possible. It's all physical causation. And mental stuff is all effect, no cause. That's not very palatable because it seems to do away with agency and free will. But if you reject radical epiphenomenalism, then you're left with reductionist physicalism. And that's not very palatable either. Because then you're just saying, well, everything mental just is physical. So it's all physical causation anyway, and I still don't have any agency or free will. So you can see what Jerry Fodor was so worried about, right? If all of this is true, it's quite unnerving. It's like our world is coming to an end. And this is, Kim is described sometimes as an epiphenomenalist because he's put together a lot of really good arguments that show the real possibility of epiphenomenalism, as we've seen in this textbook chapter. But it's not like he wants that to be the case, right? I don't think any of us want this to be the case. There are some really good arguments for it, but we don't want to be robots or automatons or zombies. We want to have free will. We want to save our agency. We want what Jerry Fodor wants. Agreed? Let's see, we're getting pretty close to the end. We've only got 2 slides left, so I'll do a little checkup. Is anyone not following so far? People seem to be, I gotta say, this class is really good at keeping up with this material. It's tricky stuff. But a lot of you are, especially I'm speaking to the people who don't necessarily have a strong background in that kind of thing, but also those who do have a background. You're all really doing really well. So good. All right, what about the extrinsicness, rather, of mental states? Remember this Chinese room thought experiment? One of the things that Searle tries to show with that is that computers do what they do by operating on syntax alone. Machines, like computers, are blind to the meaning of the symbols that they use to compute. The programmers give them the meaning. The meanings of the inputs and outputs only mean something to us. They don't mean anything to the computer, because the computer only operates on syntax, the rules, not semantics, the meaning. It's we humans who assign the meaning to the symbols. So Searle would say the semantics of some computer code are parasitic to the syntax. And according to the computational representational theory of mind, cognition is also like this. So we might also be humans computing in a language of thought, a formal language in which we think. The language of thought, by the way, is also due to Jerry Fodor. It's not a natural language. It's not like some people, when they think, they kind of have a voice in their head, like that's not what we mean. It's a logical, formal language realized in the brain that we think in. Yeah, yeah. But you're keeping up and you ask interesting questions, Jacob. So, keep it up. But yeah, you're right. Compared to business and stuff, this is quite different, isn't it? Quite different. I actually dropped out of the business program back in the day. I started taking one at college and I thought, you know what? Nah. So I went and studied philosophy and now here I am. Now, maybe we use this language of thought, a formal language in which we think. If this is the case, then is it true that the contents of our mental states bear no causal relevance when it comes to our own mental processes? Well, not necessarily. And that's because the meaning of the symbols in our language of thought, if we do have a language of thought, must be grounded in the world. Unlike in the case of the computer, where we the programmers, decide what things mean. So nothing means anything to the computer running the program, but it does mean something to us, the programmers or the users. But it's not the same when it comes to us, the language of thought. Kripke and Putnam's twin Earth thought experiment shows this. This is the idea that there is some twin Earth where there's everything is exactly the way it is here, except instead of water being H2O, they have a substance called XYZ. So when I say water is wet on Earth, water refers to H2O, but on twin Earth, water is wet. The water refers to XYZ. So the meaning of the content of water is wet is fixed because of the way the world is. What we call causal historical relations with their content. And this is the point, because I really don't want to get too into the weeds here. Contents do not supervene on the intrinsic properties of the states that carry them, Kim says. On the other hand, we expect behavior causation to be local and depend only on intrinsic properties of the behaving organism. This, then, is yet another problem of mental causation. It challenges us to answer the following question. How can intentional mental states like beliefs and desires be efficacious in behavior causation in virtue of their contents? And this is another problem concerning mental causation, but this goes beyond even the scope of this chapter. But we might talk about it a little bit next time when we talk about mental content. So let's see, it's about 12 minutes after 5. That's it for today. Next time, for next Monday, please read chapter 8, mental content, and we will discuss mental content. And then after that, we only have 2 more classes. Wednesday, where we do consciousness, and then the Monday after, where we do consciousness again. I can't believe how fast this class has gone. Like, wow, we're already up to chapter 8. That's crazy. We've been flying through this stuff. They really do. They always zoom by. Because we are on Zoom, perhaps. Also, yeah, 3 hours twice a week. That's a lot. And I know you guys, a lot of you are like, "Whoa, hang on, slow down, explain this, explain that." And I'm totally, I love it when you do that. But like I said, given the material we're covering and the time we're doing it in, everybody's doing pretty good. This is really good. I'm so happy with how things are going. Oh, last semester, yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was in undergrad and my first year went by slow. But by the time I got to the end, time started going by so fast. And then the master's degree went went even faster. And the PhD felt like it went faster than my undergrad. It's crazy. I think that just comes with getting older, though. Yeah, yeah. Philosophy, if you're right, Sohaila, if you can grind through it in a compressed amount of time, but it's like one of the only courses you're doing, it is easy that way. Not like in fall, winter where you have 4 or 5 classes and you've got so much to juggle, right? Yeah, yeah, Noah. But you know what? That just comes with getting older. So stop and smell the roses. Enjoy the time. You all have a really unique opportunity. Nowadays, it's kind of like university is something that people feel they have to do, university or college, because we're told it's kind of. Oh, thanks, Sohaila. That's lovely. Thank you. Well, happy to have you here. But it's true, you're kind of like told, oh, you gotta go to university. You gotta go to university. Oh, good. Yeah, first philosophy class for a bunch of people. You don't have to. No one has to go to university. And a lot of people go for the wrong reasons. They go because they think it's going to get them a job. And that's not what university is for. That is what college is for. University is to equip you with knowledge. University is so that you can learn because learning is intrinsically good in and of itself. That's what university is for. So, and I'm saying this as somebody who, again, started in business. I'm not knocking business, but started that way, didn't like it, started to think, is this how I really want to spend my life as an accountant or a manager? No, it wasn't. Because one day I'm gonna die, and I don't want to regret not having lived the life I wanted to live. So I dropped out and I went and studied philosophy, and it's worked out. Um, but as I was moving through undergrad, I kind of lost sight of this a little bit in grad school, admittedly. But when I was going through undergrad, I thought, wow, this is really such a cool opportunity, and I really it was and still is important to stop and smell the roses, as it were. Yeah, accounting. Yeah, accounting does kind of suck. Well, some people are into it though. And Sohaila switched from computer science to psychology for the same reason. Yeah, Jack is in computer science with a minor in philosophy. If you ever go back, it would be for philosophy. Nice. Well, all this is to say, enjoy your time while you're here, because some of you will go off and not be in university anymore. Some of you might go to grad school and become instructors like me, and that's great. But not everyone gets to do that. So enjoy your time, really, because as you get older, time starts to go faster. And you really do start wondering, oh, where the heck did it all go? Not that I'm that old, but you know, always try and remember this. So that's it. Speaking of time, we're about out of it. So if there are no questions, I'll see you on Monday and we'll talk about mental causation. So farewell, everyone, and bye for now. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Yes. Bye.